Hey guys, just reminding you that this is part two of our episode on pregnancy and birth. So when the music ends, we're just going to be getting right into the second half of our discussion without much intro. And then we'll be finishing up regularly with our working on the dad bod segment. Thanks for listening.
Um,
I have a question for you
yeah,
because this has been my experience, but I wanted to see what yours has been around this, right? So we've talked about some stigmas that we both had to overcome with the decisions we and our wives made. Um, Mine being home birth, yours being, you know, I say choosing to do a cesarean, but obviously I don't want to make it sound like you guys were flush with options
yeah.
either.
So
Um,
the only other option would have been an attempted. I forget what the acronym stands for. We'll look it up in. But an ECV where it's a procedure where you essentially try to like unbreach a baby, but you are basically in an operating room because if you screw up or not screw up, but you can basically like induce labor and then you are doing the belly birth cesarean section like in the room there. That actually
yeah,
happened to our friend for their first kid. They
yeah.
attempted the ECV. So.
Well, what I was going to say is if you have experienced that, like during pregnancy, obviously you get all this blowback.
Mm-hmm.
And then the kid comes out, and in our cases, minus, colds and normal kid stuff, we seem to be blessed with relatively healthy kids.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's gone from wow, how can you do that? Is that legal? Like, are you going to be in the backwoods? Obviously not you, that's to me. Like what in the world? Like, are you going to, what happens if anything goes wrong? Like, and a midwife is there, so that's what happens if anything goes wrong. The midwife is there, and she would be on the phone with the hospital immediately, and an ambulance would come, and yada yada yada. But like the baby comes out, the kid's fine, the kid's healthy, and then like it turns into, wow, you had a home birth? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
None of the reservations, none of the doubts, because what happened? You got to the finish line just freaking fine, and all of their regards about how much Oxycontin you were taking, or whether you were having a belly birth, or whether you were doing it on your own bed is out the window because you got a healthy kid sitting there.
Yep. That
Like,
means yeah. That I guess we did have that kind of honeymoon period until we got pregnant again, and then it all comes back. Like that second pregnancy. Um, but what we learned because my first daughter, the reason she was breech was because of the umbilical cord and not the fibroid. There was the option where we, for our second daughter, um, could have opted for a vaginal birth that second time around. But honestly, my wife was just kind of like, I've already got the scar and
yeah,
I've done it before. Like, I know how it's going to be. Um,
yeah,
you know,
more at ease with it.
whatever. I will say, like in that moment, what we didn't know then was when we made the decision was that first doctor that birthed our older daughter. Decide we kind of just missed her cutoff of when she personally decided she no longer was going to do the OB birth and deliveries. She was going to be strictly a gynecologist. So for the second pregnancy, we were seeing a different doctor in the practice, and
Yeah,
everything went fine until actually, I don't even know if you and I have talked about this offline, man. But my second daughter's birth, some things. We were only able to schedule. The hospital will only schedule 3 belly birth operating room in the operating room a day, only three
sure,
time slots because they've got to be it's got to be
right,
available for emergencies and like stuff like
sure,
that. So we had the unfortunately, we're only able to get the third slot of the day, the 5 o'clock slot. Um,
Okay.
and so that meant that my wife's fasting wasn't going to end at the 11 or 2 o'clock slots. It was going to end at the 5 o'clock slot. So then we were ready to go in, all prepped. She took her pre-surgery little cocktail that they give you just to like weed off infection, but that and um, were they literally like unhooked her from the bed. They like were ready. They were about to put her in the wheelchair to put her to the operating, take her to the operating room, and we find out that the doctor, another patient of the doctor's, was just rushed in like 9 centimeters dilated. So we were like, all right. So we got bumped.
Mm.
We got bumped like 4 more times.
Oh,
And our daughter wasn't technically born until 10:34 p.m. But um, what was
you almost missed
really,
that cutoff. So, like, I
well, yeah.
know
So
Ethan was trying to get scheduled it so that his daughter wouldn't have to be in the next school year because it was
it's
like right
true.
on the line where you were. You almost
Yeah.
got bumped out of your strategy there, man.
Yeah, we almost got bumped into paying for daycare for an extra year. But
Whew.
on the more serious note, um, so that so in this pregnancy, the second time around, you know, I guess the fibroid, I guess 30% of the time, fibroids come back to life in a new pregnancy, and there's an opportunity to grow a little more. And
30% of the time, it comes back every time.
our fibroid did get a little bigger. I think when my second daughter came out, the final verdict was after going back down to starting at 5 when we first found it, 11 when my first daughter was born, 9 throughout my second daughter's pregnancy. I think it was 12 or 13 centimeters when my second daughter was born, but it was a little bigger and was impacted the incision line. And
Ooh,
my wife, and I definitely don't think I shared this with you, lost a lot of blood, and
yeah,
she, uh, and I could tell that this was not going as smoothly as the other one,
right.
and she started shaking also because between the anesthesia, the loss of blood, the fact that they were keeping her cool for surgery, and the fasting, she was just kind of like not there. And I could tell she looked at me and was like, is everything okay? But what she was really saying was like, am I going to make it? And
Yeah,
that was the first time I didn't know what to say. And I I looked at her and I was just I like couldn't say yes with like in a believable way. I just said, "Yeah, you're going to be fine." And then I immediately like looked away and I said to the doctor, I was like, "Everything's okay, right?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's just like a lot of blood." And like, like that was not a confident answer either. And I um all I could think about in that moment was, if the worst happens right now, how do I explain that to our almost 3 year old? Like, how
yeah,
do I explain why mommy's not coming home? And
yeah,
ultimately, that they made it through the surgery okay. It was definitely a
sure.
lot worse than that first time, but I would say for the first hour or so of my second daughter's life, and actually longer than that, but that like first hour ish when you're still in the operating room, and you know typically you're still in the operating room, they're stitching back up, they're cleaning the blood, they're checking the baby, daddy's holding baby, putting baby next to mommy's face, everybody's having a good time. I did not have a good experience. I could not even think about um, how happy I was to be holding my daughter, because all I really could think about was like, is my wife going to be okay? Because like she still in
Yeah,
and out of it, even And I would say honestly, um, we didn't stay in the hospital the same 96 hours that we did when our first daughter was born, because that was pre-COVID. We wanted to get out of there and back to our our toddler as soon as we could. I
Sure.
went home every night to do dinner with her, and then back to the dinner and bedtime while my parents stayed. But I took a while to just be like actually truly happy that my second baby was born. I like shared the good
Sure.
news. I like put on a good face. I was like being a good dad, but all I could really think about was like, I just hope my wife's okay. And
Yeah.
we've, I say we're like 99% sure that we're not gonna have another kid for, you know, multiple reasons. But to me, the biggest reason isn't like we would have another kid because we ideally wanted one of each. We obviously had two girls. We'd love to have a son. There's no guarantee you can have a son, but
Right.
it's not even like the fear of like, what if we get another girl? A lot of it's fear of like, the financial situation of like having a third kid. But
Sure.
what it really comes down to for me is like, I don't know if I can go through the feeling of almost losing my wife again. And
Right.
I
There's no guarantees that that fibroid wouldn't come back and be
third
15.
time.
You know.
Yeah, third time. And it's a
Yeah.
really serious issue in women's health. I mean, they do an ultrasound like the day of, and they still didn't realize exactly how big it was, and like
Yeah.
how in the birth process, like with the uterus moving, like how it would impact the scar area. And
Yeah.
you know, um,
That's
sorry,
tough.
listeners, for getting so
No,
deep
no,
here,
but
but
this is like the real and raw thing because I think we all have, there's always like I don't know. I did not have anything close to that kind of fear because that's, like it's hard to top that because one, it's not a competition, but just on the fear scale, it's hard to have something scarier than that happen. But like our our first one, both of our kids were born in our bedroom. And the first time I was sort of nervous, about it happening, but it was a much different experience the second time around. So, like the first time, it was a Saturday. I remember it was a Saturday. It was in 2018. And it was like one of the Saturdays that you could go early vote for the election. And my wife woke me up 7:30, had let me sleep in a little bit and was like, "Hey, I'm starting to feel a couple contractions. If there's anything you need to do, like going and doing that voting, you know, you might want to go do that." Totally calm, totally fine, all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, okay, but we had been going to classes religiously. Like I said, our friends had been going through the same thing with us. It's all we've been talking about. We'd been having dinner with these friends like every single week, like talking about things, having classes separately every single week, with a community of people, and just felt like really empowered and ready to go. Um, because the way it works is like I'm sitting there, she has contractions, I'm monitoring the contractions, doing the thing like timing. When they get to a certain point, I want to say it's 3 minutes, I call the midwife. And the midwife on call answers, they register it, they get some more data. They'll either say, I'm on my way, or call me when it gets to this, right? And it's usually judging on how far the midwife is. They know your address, and the midwife we had for our first birth, she lived 10 minutes away. So it was not like a big thing of like, she told me to wait or whatever. And my wife goes into labor and she gets stuck, right? She's in the bathtub and she's getting like a shooting pain in her low back and her hip, and she cannot like get past this pain. Every time she's having a contraction, it's just this pain, and it's causing her stress, and it's causing her not to progress in the birth like she wants. And of course, that's creating more anxiety because, as I mentioned, you stop progressing, and long enough, they will send you to the hospital. So she's making incremental progress. Well, the midwife that we had at the time happened to go to the same chiropractor as my wife did at that time, and had seen her, just happened, didn't know that off the top of her head, but had happened to see her like the week before in the waiting room for the chiropractor. And on a wild hair, this midwife comes in and goes, "Hey, it's a Saturday night now. We had been hanging out all day. We'd gone for a walk. We had friends over. We drank a little champagne to celebrate, kind of thing. Because at that point, fetal alcohol syndrome's out the window. The baby's cooked, and I could go on about fetal alcohol syndrome, but that is a also understudied thing. I'm not telling everybody to go out and have a drink. I'm just saying most kids have alcoholic parents, kind of thing. But had a glass of champagne. We're having a relaxing time. My mother-in-law came over for a little bit. Then everybody left once my wife contractions started getting bad. But it's like 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. The midwife goes, "Do you want me to call the chiropractor? Just call her number, her cell number. I have it." The chiropractor comes over to our house and makes a house call, and like adjusts my wife's hip in the process. The midwife leaves because she's like, "This is going slow. We're at like 2-3 centimeters, and I'm going to go get some dinner 10 minutes away. Just call me, if things start ramping up a little bit more, she starts getting more contractions or whatever." Chiropractor comes over, adjusts my wife's hip. 30 minutes later, I'm on the phone with the midwife. My wife has the urge to push, which is a sign for like she's right at 10 centimeters. Midwife walks back in, looks at the chiropractor, and I just hear her whisper, "What did you do?" Like to her. And so that was, but it felt, even with that chaos, it felt very controlled of like, I woke up, we had a normal day. My daughter was born just before like 10 o'clock. And so it was just like this Saturday experience. Like I didn't have to call out of work. I didn't have to do anything like that. It was just a Saturday. And then I had a baby, and I set my out of office on Sunday and went about, having a little bit of paternity leave. My son, obviously, and you've experienced this, you mentioned, your parents flew in from California to help take care of your toddler. Like you have another kid, and you're planning everything around this other kid because you've got this other kid that's welcoming a younger sibling in. And the night before my wife gives birth, this is part of, as I mentioned, I have ADHD, and I think this is part of my ADHD. I was at the computer in one of our group chats debating about some dumb sports thing,
I
like
remember
conference
exactly what it
alignment
was.
or something just out there dumb. And like till like 1 o'clock in the morning, something crazy, maybe 12:30, 1 o'clock. I crawl in bed, I sneak in bed because I'm like, I don't want to admit that I was up this late. And like 45 minutes later, my wife wakes me up and goes, "Hey, I think I'm starting to have contractions." And I'm like, "Oh crap." And it's like 1:30 in the morning maybe. And she's like, "Go back to sleep. I want you to get some rest. I know it's the middle of the night. Like, go back to sleep." I go back to sleep. 30 minutes later, she wakes me up. My water broke. When your water breaks, like, it's not like the movies. For anybody who's an expecting dad, it's not like, "Oh, your water breaks, then you start having contractions and you have a nice thing." No, the water breaking is like that actually starts a timer because the birth sac is actually protecting the baby from bacteria, outside air, contaminant, all that kind of stuff. It's actually go time then. And I'm like, "Oh God." And so I'm on no sleep and I'm just running on pure adrenaline. Well, my wife ends up having what's called a precipitous birth, right? And a precipitous birth is one that happens in start to finish less than 3 hours. It is fast. It is not pleasant for her. I mean, she was like, it went from like, I called the midwife, woke the midwife up, and she's like, "Okay, we had a different midwife this time, same practice, but 45 minutes. I live down in West Palm Beach. It's 45 minutes. I'll be there." Obviously was not expecting a lot of traffic. It's 1:30 in the morning or whatever it was. also call the doula, because we got a doula this time. You know, you mentioned having a doula. We had a
Yeah.
doula our second time around because I knew that I was not going to be able to be as hands-on with the birth should it happen at a time that my daughter is home. You know, we had a contingency plan. She spends a lot of time with her grandmas, or it's like if my wife goes into labor and our daughter's with you, keep her and we'll just send you the
Mm-hmm.
signal. They have clothes, they have what she
Right.
needs, feed her, get her to school the next day, keep her. If she's home, we'll keep her home. But we got a doula so that my wife could have somebody that was giving her undivided attention. And if I needed to be dad, I could be dad to our daughter. Well, I called the doula. The doula is like, yeah, I'm in West Palm too, 45 minutes.
Damn West Palm doula people.
Listen. If this was the first birth, that wouldn't have been a problem. They would have come
Yeah.
over. We might have given them a glass of champagne. You know, we
Yeah,
might have
absolutely.
listened to some music. We had a whole playlist for the first one.
Yeah.
Second one, my wife's in the bathtub again. She wants to take a bath. We didn't have a birthing tub. A birthing tub is, you know, one of those plastic inflatable things that maybe some of you have seen. We didn't have that. She was just in our normal bathtub. Did not give birth in the bathtub because it's not sanitary. You need a completely sanitized birth tub to do that. And our tile floors between where we would set up the tub and our bedroom, when they get wet, they get slick. And so it was just like, we're not doing that. We don't want water on the floor. That's not necessary. But my wife's like, I need to take a bath. Like, it feels like I'm feeling very overwhelmed right now. She's like moaning, going into what's called transition, where she goes from like early contractions into like sort of like this deep meditative state of like focusing because she's starting to feel ready to push. And I'm like, holy crap, it's been, you know, 30 minutes since I called these folks. Like, nobody's going to be here. She's going to start pushing this baby out. And it's just me on nothing but adrenaline, like no sleep, no nothing. Holy crap. And I was just petrified of like, I'm going to have to get on the phone and someone's going to have to walk me through like delivering this damn baby because she's telling me she's got to push. And I'm walking her out of the bathtub because she's like, I feel like I got to push. And I'm like, you have to get out of the tub. You cannot deliver in the tub for a variety of reasons, not the least of which like birth tubs are like 2 feet deep. We have just a normal bathtub. You don't want the baby to hit their head on the porcelain. You don't want all of that stuff going on. I was like, we got to get you to the bed. I know you want to be in the bathtub because it's warm and it's comfortable, but you got to do it. Not to mention, my wife is making all sorts of very appropriate birth noises, but she's leaned up against the wall, and that wall connects with our daughter's room. And
Mm.
she's just like making loud noises. I'm like, oh God, this baby's gonna come and this toddler's gonna wake up, and oh my God, and oh my God. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
I am
Jesus.
I am in panic mode. And I get my wife out of the tub, like I help lift her up, and she's like leaning on me with everything she's got, and I'm like walking her to, and I walk out in the hallway, and as I walk out into the hallway, the doula is walking in the door, and I'm just like, oh thank you. Oh thank you. Like, you know, Jesus Christ, Yahweh, Allah, I don't care who's up there, thank you. Like,
Yeah.
and she comes, the midwife comes a little bit later, but I just had this panic attack of like, oh God, this is what, like, we're talking about the stigmas of like, so it's just you guys in the house. I'm like, no, there's people there. And then I'm like, there's nobody here. Like, what are we going to do? But it turned out okay. My son was born. I think my wife, you know, started going into labor. He was born at like 4:45.
Mm.
And her, you know, she started having contractions at like 12:45, so it was about 4 hours all in all. And you know, but it was definitely that was my sort of like panic moment. You know, there was no like, how am I going to explain this to my daughter? It was just like I
Yeah.
was more concerned with like I was actually more concerned about my wife and my son at that moment of like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
I,
I did really well on my high school AP tests, and so I only had to take one science class in college, and it was marine biology. I am in no way prepared for anything. Like,
yeah. Like you said, that the fear is not a competition, but I would say you and I had equal but different kinds of fear. Mine
sure,
was the fear of loss, and yours was the fear of like self ability to deliver a baby. Both
And
equally
keep my
scary.
wife and my son safe too. Where I'm
Yes,
just
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
what are we going to do here with that? But
yeah. Because
it did
like,
luckily turn out okay. I will say
yeah,
my son did come out as well with the cord wrapped around his neck, and this is one of those areas, and there's quite a few, and I'm not going to go into a rant or rave, but it is one of those things as you talked about, good kinds, bad kinds. I don't have enough data to make any sort of declarative statements. But one thing that's really interesting about the experience we had versus some anecdotal evidence we've heard of people being, forced into a cesarean section when they didn't have any other reasons to do it other than the cord being around the neck. Like, the fact of the matter is that cord is like a bungee cord, and the baby can nurse before that cord is cut,
mm-hmm.
right? So if it's around their neck, they can get out. you
Yeah,
know, I'm not going to say with some certainty that like that is always the case. I'm sure it could be wrapped two,
mm-hmm.
three times, all that kind of stuff.
Sure,
But our son came out with the cord around his neck. He's a happy bouncing baby boy, and nothing was wrong because he's not trying to breathe until he gets out. And
mm-hmm.
once he's out, you take the cord off,
Right,
right?
and
And so
and yeah, and it was yes, there's good and bad wraparounds. Our situation was just that she was wrapped in such a way that it prevented her from flipping. Again,
well,
it
and it's
wasn't
also
yeah,
but it's also the
yeah,
thing of like for you, it's just another compounding reason of
yes,
like, okay, the fibroid makes us think we really should have the cesarean section. Now the cord is wrapped around. It's like you're just adding more
yeah,
risk factors on top of
yeah,
it, and it becomes like the calculation changes with
yeah,
every single one. It's like, yeah, that was the only complication with our son. Both of our kids felt like they waited until the last few days
mm-hmm.
to actually turn.
Yeah,
And my son was also 8.5 pounds, so like it wasn't just he came out fast. Like he was big and fast. It was
yeah.
like that's a lot.
Both our kids were pretty small. Our oldest was 6 pounds 13 ounces. Our second was 5 pounds 15 ounces, which was actually what I was talking about. Not really getting to enjoy being a dad again in that moment. The doctor comes to me and she says, "Look, your baby's small," and I was like, you know, trying to listen to her while also like looking at my wife and then seeing the baby, making sure like, when they're doing all of like the newborn testing, I'm trying
Yeah,
to make sure like got three things going, and the doctor says, uh, she's small, so we need to see if she acts her age or acts her weight or her size. And I was like, I need to, I was like, I don't know what you mean, because she was uh, she was cut out, technically before the due date, but it was the same week. You schedule those before the due date, so you're not in a like medical situation. Um,
yeah,
and then, but because of the fibroid in this second pregnancy, they attribute the fact that even though she was in there almost the full 40 weeks, but was technically anything under 6 pounds is considered premature. They're like, it must have been the fibroid, like,
yeah,
fighting off like some nutrients. So I was like, so what does that mean? Like, is she like premature? Like, I was literally just like, are you taking her to the NICU? I felt so bad at how unemotional I was being, like, because I was dealing
yeah,
with this. And it was just like, matter of factly, like, are you taking her to the NICU? And she's
yeah.
like, no,
Give
no,
me
no, no,
the
not,
data and let me look at my
yeah,
wife, kind of
yeah,
thing. I get
yeah.
that.
And she was like, no, not at all. We just, what we just need to monitor her temperature. And I said, okay, like what do you mean? And then it's like, well, because she is technically below the premature cutoff, we worry for temperature regulation. So if her temperature spikes and drops, we're gonna have to take her to the NICU. And I said, okay. And I said, but
Yeah,
otherwise, she's just a fully developed small kid. And they were like, yes. And I said, okay. Thank you for
yeah,
matter of factly, I was like, okay, like thank you for the info. Like, I need to like be here
Yeah.
now. And again, it, that what I ultimately, it's about the mother and her comfort. But this is a podcast about talking about dad things, and I did feel that I lost out on a really important new dad moment because of
Yeah.
everything that was going on. And
Yeah.
like ultimate and it's just obviously our millions of followers are going to hear this, but it wasn't something I talked about a lot. And I don't have the time or patience for every single person who criticizes our choice of having two belly births to go
Yeah.
through all of this with them.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I don't owe them anything, but sometimes it's like I get worked up. You know me, I get triggered about a lot of things, and like I go down and I'm like so determined to like debate people until they're
Sure.
wrong, till they realize they're wrong and have wronged me and offended me. But like this is
Yeah.
one of those things where
It's
it's just like it
exhausting
would,
too.
it's exhausting. It would take too much time, and
Yeah.
like I would rather get worked up and triggered by something that doesn't actually matter because there's no life or death scenario there, and then I could go
Yeah.
back to living my life.
Yeah.
um,
And it sucks too because like that's one of those you talked about missing out on that and this isn't to and I feel for that like I feel for that in both those situations because my panic for my wife and my son turned out absolutely fine. Baby boy was born, he was healthy. And then one of the things in temperature regulation reminded me of that. One of the things that they do they do in hospitals too. It's not just a home birth thing, but they very are paramount on it because you're not working with, there's not a lot of heat lamps. There's not going to be a specialty, bassinet or anything like that
mhm.
for the baby. They're going to swaddle them in blankets and stuff, but they're going to do a lot of skin to skin,
Yeah.
right? Because the mom can help regulate the baby's temperature just by chest to chest contact. And obviously, your wife was not in a position to like your wife like it's another option that got like taken off the table for you guys. But
Yeah.
but I have this moment where one of the things that happens, right, is like with the home birth, it's like and doing all their checks with my wife, right? They make it very much about her. Yes, the baby comes out. They're making sure the baby's great. They weigh the baby, they measure the baby, they check for 10 toes, 10 fingers, all the things they need to do. But then they're very much focused on my wife, passing the placenta, making
Mhm.
sure that the bleeding stops. They stay there for a couple hours because what has to happen is my wife has to use the bathroom before they can leave.
Mhm.
They want to make sure that she can actually do that and everything is functioning there as it needs to be. And she also showers, right? There's a lot of things going on and, bodily fluids everywhere. And so she needs to shower. And when she showers, the protocol is skin to skin time with dad,
Mhm.
right? And so it was one of those moments that it's, like 6:30 in the morning at this point. It's time for her to shower. It's like, are you ready? And so I take my shirt off. And speaking of mini me's, my daughter's standing there next to me. She strips naked. She's like, "Let's go!" Like I'm ready to step in, and I'm like, "You're barely bigger than he is," but like I've got a photo of me, and you can't tell that she's naked because it's only shoulder up for both of us.
Sure.
I've got my shirt off, but she's completely naked, and we're just in the bed, and she's just smiling, not touching her brother, just like I'm happy to be here and do what everybody else is doing because she was 3.5 years old at the time and like but it was this really just sort of like awesome moment that my daughter was able to come in and just like be part of that and that was a very special moment so I definitely feel that of like not having that connection and not having that taken away from you and so I'm sorry about that
So
but if I could provide sort of like an overarching thing. I would say I went back to it. My wife mentioned pregnant person's always right. I think, yeah, by and large, if you're on video, you saw me roll my eyes a little bit. I do not disagree with the sentiment at all that the pregnant person is right. That said, I think there are morons out there. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
we've married sensible women. I think there
Yeah.
are people that could say, yeah, I want to go have this baby in a ditch in the woods. And maybe they need a reality check on some of that stuff. But I would say that, as I mentioned before, the comfort of the woman, and as far as being a partner to a pregnant person, becoming a dad or becoming a dad to a second, third, fourth, fifth kid, the best thing you can do is support your partner's decisions through it, be their sounding board, and like, especially as Ethan was, sort of be that sentry out there, playing defense and allowing them to have the pregnancy and the birth experience they want and not have to deal with as much of the the bull crap, because
I,
there's a lot out there. And like, I think there are a lot of, I've heard stories of plenty of partners who are not that invested, or it's like, oh yeah, whatever you want to do, oh, the doctor's going to
mhm.
take care of it. Be involved, learn, ask questions. That way you're not adding to the chorus of doubters. Get
Mhm.
on the same page with them early and often. That way you can support their decision, or early when it's possible, like when they're 25 weeks pregnant and you're like, I don't think I like the doctor, or I think I want, I think we should consider something else. That's too late. Most providers are not going to see a new patient at that point.
Mhm.
So as soon as that, as soon as they pee on a stick or you get the blood and urine test, have those conversations early and often, so you guys can, either you can get on her same page, or you guys can come to some sort of compromise, and you can be that brick wall together going through that. Because no matter what you're doing, you could lay out the data tables and say, this is the most common form of birth, the most common, most people go to a hospital, have a vaginal birth with an epidural, and you could have 10 people come up to you that had the exact same procedures that you had, and they would still question your judgment. I fully believe that.
And
So,
uh, I wanna say, um, you know, obviously this is not the route we went, because we didn't have the choice. But before we knew that the choice for a vaginal birth was taken away from us,
yeah,
um, any kind of vaginal birth, I was actually I was playing defense against my wife because um, she was hearing from all the women who have had babies before. Everyone who became a doctor in that moment would tell
right,
her that you want to have a vaginal birth and you don't want to have an epidural. You want to like feel it, otherwise you're weak. And that is not true. There is nothing wrong with not wanting to feel pain. And
right.
but at the same time, my wife had a fear of not being able to feel and know what's going on
Sure.
down there.
Right.
Both are equally scary,
And
or
so,
both can be equally scary depending on the person who's having those feelings.
right. And
So,
that's one of those, it's something that we went through too. And like, to explain to people, I mentioned Pitocin and epidurals earlier. So Pitocin is an inducing drug, and then
mhm,
an epidural is like a numbing, and they inject it into you, and it basically numbs the lower half of your body so you can't feel what's going on down there.
mhm,
But you're absolutely right that like, there are people that like, if it's one of these catch 22s, right? If you get Pitocin, the contractions are much more likely to come on faster, stronger, and not be this gradual buildup, right? And maybe they're giving you Pitocin because you're at 42 weeks and the baby's got to come out, and they're like, if you don't do this, we're cutting you open, belly birth time.
mhm,
Or there may be a variety of other reasons that they're giving you Pitocin, but you get Pitocin, the contractions come on stronger. It makes it more likely that you're not going to be able to deal with that pain, and then you're going to want an epidural, right? And then the epidural, because you can't feel it, you might not be able to push as well or get as strong of contractions, so then you need more Pitocin. And so there are some instances where it's like that can be a catch 22, but at the same time, there are plenty of, as you mentioned, there are plenty of cases of women who just generally do not feel confident, for whatever reason is their prerogative, that they can do it without that. And as I said, them being comfortable feels pretty paramount. So if they're like, I want an epidural because I am not sure that I can handle this pain,
Mm-hmm.
then talk to the doctor and say, I think I want an epidural. What is it like if I don't get it?
Mm-hmm.
What is it like if I don't get an epidural? Can I change my mind? Like, have those kind of questions for your medical provider, because I think like you can go in with a birth plan and like feels like 9 times out of 10 it's going to get shot to shit.
Yeah,
You
I,
know?
I will. I will say my mom told me that, and I want to say, I don't. Our unsolicited advice episode hasn't aired yet, but if you're listening to this one, then you've heard that one. But um, where my parents were actually excellent was they did not question; they just fully supported every decision that I told my parents that we were making with our birth, because
Yeah.
they they would ask a question every now, but it was never in a way that like suggested any kind of disapproval. They would just be like, "Oh, like, can you tell me more about this? Because this is new to me." But I will say, my mom told me I was I always like to make an entrance, and I was a nice 24-hour labor. But my mom straight up was like, "Can you cut this kid out of me? And can you give me an epidural? I'm busy. I got things to do. I don't want to feel this." And the doctor was like, "No, no, you're like way past that at this point. So I'll just coming out the traditional way for
Yeah.
this one.
Coming down the chute.
Epidural, we'll see." Yeah. So, but it's just it's it's entirely up to the mom on what they want to do, and you like you said, it's our jobs as dads or any kind of birth partner to just
Yeah.
be supportive, play that defense sometimes against the mom themselves, because you have to be the one that stands strong and reminds them that decisions were made and why decisions were made. And
Sure.
like when they start inevitably second guessing and second guessing themselves, you got to be there to remind them that we had this discussion like in a much calmer time. Like
Yeah.
this is why things
Without the hormones flowing, without the adrenaline
yes,
flowing,
yeah, this is
all the stuff going on.
yeah, and you know, um, just I do want to say I had certain opportunities with my second daughter being born. Like she and I did the skin to skin because when you do have a C-section, uh, the spinal injection, which is non-negotiable for belly birth C-sections because it is surgery. Um, you know, there's a rumor out there. I'm not going to say a stigma. This is a straight up rumor that the doctors in the operating rooms will not allow moms who have done belly births to do skin to skin. That is not true. They leave it up to the mom in the moment and their medical judgment if the mom can physically hold the baby without dropping them. So
Yeah.
that is where that comes in. So unfortunately, both times my wife was not in a position to skin to skin. But the moment
Yeah.
we were taken from the operating room to the post op room, skin to skin happened. For both of us. So
Nice.
when I say that I felt like I lost out, it was honestly just on the emotional ability to
Yeah.
connect because I was so focused on my wife's recovery. And so I did feel bad, like I was going through the motions. And I mentioned I had come home. Each night we stayed at the hospital to do dinner and bedtime with our older daughter. And, you know, part of me, that second night I went home, my parents kept saying, "Hey, you look exhausted. Like, are you sure you can drive back?" And I was like, yeah, no, I have to go back. And they were just like, I was like, your mother. They were like, her mom's there, your mother in law's there, like she'll be okay. And it's like, no, like you don't know what it was like in that room. And I kind of like broke down and said it to them, and they were just like, why didn't you tell us that this is how you were feeling? And I was like, I haven't had like the time to like
Yeah, I mean,
understand
sometimes
how I'm
yeah,
feeling. You know, I'm
you haven't had the
I
space. You can't break down in front of your wife and in those
yeah,
moments. I mean, that's
and
something you can talk about months later.
I
Weeks
can't break.
later, days later. I don't know, but later.
Yeah, I can't, and I also can't break down in the car driving at night when I'm like on no sleep. You know,
Yeah,
I didn't have the opportunity to feel the feelings, um,
yeah,
like we talked about in wins and losses, and just you know, it was a hard experience, and luckily, I mentioned my daughter is going to be 1 in 2 weeks, and so far so good. Hoping to avoid a dabble of COVID and strep, but um, I think for the most part, you know, it was really good to talk about this.
sure.
I know that this is a topic that I was pretty passionate about. One of our mutual friends just had a second kid, which and like talked about their birthing experience, which kind of, for lack of a better
Sure.
word, triggered this memory that I wanted to just like
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for sharing because I knew some of those details, and I think you had cursory explained it, but yeah, it's definitely and it was another reason that I wanted to do this topic because we had such drastically different birth experiences from what I think people define as the norm in both sides of whatever spectrum you want to put that on. But yeah, I think for everybody out there, I hope it's something that they can take into a pregnancy, into a birth, and understand that what we went through is probably not what you're going to go through, but be prepared for those kind of things. Being prepared is the best thing you can do. You mentioned having birth plans, doing your homework, doing your research. The last thing, and I'm going to put this in the show notes too, but one thing that I wanted to highlight that was very useful for me, it would probably, it might save you in some of these awkward conversations or proving your point if you're ever looking for data. I highly recommend a website called evidencebasedbirth.com. And what it is, it's exactly what it sounds. It's not built with an agenda. What this person does, I believe she's a nurse, but she collects studies and data on all sorts of birth related topics, pregnancy related topics, all those kinds of things, and she presents them. And she might do videos on some of them. She might just present the studies. She might just distill the information. But what she'll do is, like, let's say my wife was trying to induce labor with our daughter. Both our kids were just over 40 weeks. My daughter was like 40 in 5 days. My son was 40 in 3 days. And so it becomes one of the safety nets is 42 weeks, and then you go to the hospital for home births. And so she's very, creates anxiety. And there are things they say like prune juice
And
or
spicy food, sex.
all sorts of stuff,
Yeah.
sex, um, all sorts of things that can induce labor. And I remember with our first daughter, we went on that website, before my wife just started taking everything under the sun to try and induce labor. And there was a breakdown. And it wasn't like, this is what you should do. It was like, this has this kind of correlation and this percentage of chance of working. And so it was just, here's the data. And it presented the data, and then it allows you to make your own decisions. But if you're struggling with a lot of people giving you anecdotes or old wives' tales, for lack of a better term, go to evidence based birth and you can actually back up your feelings or maybe disprove your feelings with some data on that kind of stuff. And I think that would be a fantastic resource for anybody looking to make smarter, more informed decisions with their partner.
Well said. I also endorse that website.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Well, thank you for working on the Dad Pod with us. Thank you for sticking with us for this two-part episode. I guess before we go, should we do a weight check-in of working on the Dad Pod real quick?
Yeah. So I weighed myself. I mentioned we went on vacation, so I weighed myself before um, vacation and after vacation. Um, I would say that I ate a little too much of the home cooked meal. So as of yesterday, or of the home or of the vacation cooked meals for me. So I would say as of yesterday, I am at 190.6. Before vacation, um, I was that's that's not what I wanted. Before vacation, I was 189.4. So it was a 1 pound. I gained a pound on vacation, so I set myself back a pound. But
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. Well, for me, so there was a lot of I had what I would call in previous times a bad weekend, but I had an indulgent weekend. It's the first time since we've been calorie counting where I think I've gone over my calorie allotment for the day, and I did it on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday, I did an odd job for somebody who needed some help with something, ended up giving me $100 cash for helping him out with something. And so I was like, I'm going to get some takeout. And so we got Flanagan's. And so, for anybody that
Nice.
is unfamiliar, it's a South Florida sports bar chain. It's delicious. I got a Texas burger, and it came with like half a pound of fries, and we got some garlic rolls. And I was probably over by 600, 800 calories. And then on Sunday, we had like a potluck lunch at our church. And so it's the
Mm,
same kind of thing with your breakfast buffet that you were talking about a few episodes back, where it's just like, it's not even that like I couldn't control myself. It was just like I kind of wanted to try something of everything and ended up with like
yeah.
15 things on my plate, and it probably was 1,500, 2,000 calories, pretty easy. And it was like, even though some of it was a green salad or just a hamburger with ketchup and mustard, but there was potato salads and macaroni salads and some cheese thing and a
Sure.
million
Sure.
different
Sure.
things
Sure.
plus desserts. And so I've gone through, my graph is sort of very like up and down, because last week when you were on vacation, I weighed myself. I started off at 188.2, and last week I was down to 183.6. So I was almost 5 pounds down in like maybe 2 weeks. And I was like feeling good. And I had to like quell those feelings because I'm like, this might be like an absurdly low point. Like I am not like, I actually have to work pretty hard to make sure I hit my calories, because I'm only trying to lose half a pound a week, but I do a really good job of making sure I'm only under by like 100. Even if that means
Mm,
going and eating some just like dry bread before I go to bed or something. But I think because of this weekend and maybe some bloating, some water retention, whatever, I was back up to 186.4. So I gained almost 3 pounds in a week, according to my scale. But I have to remember that, like, okay, I'm looking at the thing now, and it's been 16 days of weighing myself, and I'm down 2 pounds in 2 weeks. So, like, this is a message to everybody out there. Like, don't just look at the individual data points, look at the trend lines.
mhm,
And I'm like, at first I wanted to kick myself because I'm like, what the heck did I do this weekend? Like, I didn't think I was that, heinous. It was like 2 meals. And then I'm like, okay, maybe I was just really dehydrated and I wasn't
mhm,
actually 183.6 pounds. So yeah, I
yeah.
had to jump over that mental hurdle of like, everything's okay. Trust the process.
Mhm,
Just keep going. It'll happen.
yeah.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
guys. Ethan, you have anything to add?
No, just thank you all for listening tonight. It was obviously a very near and dear to my heart subject. So thank you for
Yeah,
sharing
for
the
sure.
experience with me and bearing through it.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you for working on the Dad Pod with us. We will catch you next time. See ya.
Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.